The air in my home on the Oregon coast always tasted of two things: salt and freedom. Today, it tasted of a third: desperation. It had walked in the door, clinging to the two people I hadn't seen in 15 years. Sarah, my daughter, and Mark, her husband, stood on the hand-oiled walnut floors of my foyer, their faces a pale imitation of the ones I remembered. Their smiles were thin, brittle things, stretched too tight over a foundation of pure need. Their eyes, however, were ravenous. They weren't looking at me. They were devouring the room. They scanned the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the furious Pacific, the Italian marble fireplace, the minimalist art on the walls that had cost more than the house I'd lost. "Mom," Sarah breathed, her voice a dry rasp. We need to talk." 15 years. 15 years since they had surgically removed me from their lives, a benign tumor they decided was malignant. 15 years without a single phone call on my birthday. 15 years without a Christmas card. 15 years of growing old without ever once holding the hands of the grandchildren I knew, existed only through the blurry, distant photos I'd glimpsed on social media. And now, 6 months after I had bought this fortress of solitude with cash, they reappeared. Ghosts drawn not by love, but by the scent of money. I held my silence, letting it stretch. I watched them. Mark, who had always been so proud of his tailored suits, was wearing a shirt with a frayed collar. He kept trying to subtly peek around me, as if assessing the home's square footage for a future appraisal. Sarah was worse. She wore a thin, faded cardigan that had seen too many winters. The lines of stress around her eyes were deep trenches, dug by worry and sleepless nights. Her hands trembled as she clutched a worn-out synthetic purse. "Talk," I finally said, the word emerging from me as cold and clean as a piece of sea glass. How fascinating. After 15 years of absolute silence, now you want to talk. The blood drained from Sarah's face. Mark cleared his throat, a small, nervous sound that was utterly beneath the man who had orchestrated my exile. They looked like travelers who had expected a warm inn and found a locked fortress. The desperation that had been a scent was now a visible aura, clinging to them like wet fog. During those long, cruel years of abandonment, I had survived. I had survived by turning my grief into sustenance. My artisanal jams and preserves became my armor. Every summer, while they were presumably taking luxury vacations and building a perfect family album, I was at the farmer's market in a small inland town. I stood under a brutal sun, my hands stained purple with huckleberries, my back aching from lifting heavy crates. I smiled at strangers who appreciated the craft in my hands more than my own blood ever had. My hands had become maps of that survival. The skin was tough, scarred from boiling sugar and shattered jars. My hair had gone from brown to silver, not in gentle strands, but in one stark surrender to time and stress. But my spirit, while battered, had not broken. It had simply calcined, hardened into something resilient. The memory of those days was still sharp. The smell of simmering marionberries, cardamom, and pure vanilla, the precise chemistry of getting a pectin-free jam to set. Those aromas used to fill my home when Sarah was a little girl, before she had learned that love was transactional. Back when she would hug my legs and call me the best jam maker in the world. Those golden afternoons felt like a different life, lived by a different woman, a naive, soft woman who believed that the bond between a mother and child was unconditional, unbreakable. The change had begun not with a bang, but with a whisper. It started the day Sarah met Mark at a corporate retreat. She was an intern, bright-eyed and eager. He was a junior executive, all sharp angles and calculated charm. At first, he was perfect. He called me Eliza, because Mom felt too formal for such a vibrant, modern woman. He praised my jams at Christmas, that first and last Christmas, with a smile that never, ever reached his cold, assessing eyes. He was secretly measuring my influence, probing for weaknesses. The slow poison began to seep in. A weekend visit canceled. Mark has a huge deadline, Eliza. He just needs total quiet. A phone call cut short. "Mom, Mark's just walking in. I'll call you back." She never did. The messages became more infrequent, the excuses more elaborate. Invitations were lost in the mail. Plans were misremembered. The exclusions started as small cuts, the kind you tell yourself are accidents. The first birthday of my first grandchild. "Oh, Mom, it was just a tiny thing at their house, just Mark's family. You know, his parents are so demanding. We didn't want to overwhelm you. My 60th birthday. We sent a gift card. Didn't you get it? The mail is so unreliable. The second grandchild's baptism. I found out about that one from a Facebook post 3 weeks later." Each excuse was a tiny, sharp blade. I would smile and nod into the phone. "Of course, sweetheart, I understand. We'll do it next time." But next time became a phantom, a mirage in the desert of my loneliness. My phone sat on the charger, a silent black rectangle of judgment. The nights were the worst. The silence of my small apartment was deafening. I cooked for one. I talked to the photographs on my wall. I celebrated holidays with a single, sad slice of store-bought cake. Mr. Henderson at the local bakery always asked about Sarah. "She's so busy." I'd lie, the words tasting like ash. Her new life, you know, the children, Mark's job. But now, standing on the threshold of this magnificent house, with the Pacific thundering its eternal rhythm behind me, I saw them clearly, not as my daughter and her husband, but as two desperate strangers. "Come in," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. I gestured with a hand that was no longer stained with berries, but was clean, manicured. I watched their eyes widen as they took in the great room. The light poured in, glinting off the crystal and chrome. My new reality was a physical blow to them. Mark, the appraiser, was mentally calculating the value of every object. Sarah just looked small, a ghost in a machine of wealth she couldn't comprehend. "Sit," I commanded, pointing to a cream-colored sofa that cost more than my entire jam business had made in a decade. They sat on the edge, too nervous to lean back. "I suppose after 15 years you have a lot to tell me." Mark tried to take the lead, puffing himself up into that man-of-the-house posture he always used. "Eliza, we know it's been a while." 15 years, 4 months, and 22 days. I interrupted, my voice quiet but precise. "Not a while, a lifetime. The lifetime of my grandchildren, who I have never met." Sarah finally looked up. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not the tears of remorse. They were the tears of a cornered animal. I felt nothing. I had cried an ocean of my own tears, all of them alone. Her calculated moisture couldn't move me now. "Mom, it wasn't like that," she whispered. "It was. Complicated. Mark's job. The kids." "The kids I don't know," I repeated. "The children who don't know they have a grandmother who would have given them the world. The children you denied me." During those 15 years, I had built a fortress, not of money, but of routine. I rose at 4 a.m. The sugar had to be precise. The fruit had to be perfect. The sterilization process was exacting. Those recipes weren't just my livelihood. They were my salvation. They were the one thing in my life I could control. Sundays at the market were my church. Clara, a woman of 70 with a spine of steel and a similar story, became my confidant. Her son had married a woman who saw her as competition, and she too had been exiled. We were a quiet sisterhood of the abandoned. "They build their own lives, Eliza," Clara told me one afternoon as she bought 3 jars of my huckleberry cardamom. "They convince themselves we're a burden, a relic from a past life. But you wait. The moment their perfect lives crack, the moment they need something. Oh, then they remember they have a mother. They always remember then." How prophetic her words were. Watching Sarah wring her hands on my expensive sofa, I understood. The poison had been so subtle. In the first year of their marriage, Sarah's calls were still weekly, but Mark was always in the background. A cough, a loudly asked question. "Your mother calls a lot, doesn't she?" I heard him say once, his voice a low rumble, when Sarah thought she had muted the phone. "My mother never bothers us. She understands boundaries." My desire to hear my daughter's voice, my need to be part of her new family, my simple, uncomplicated love. All of it was reframed as a problem. I was dramatic, I was interfering. I was not respecting their boundaries. The invitations dwindled, then stopped. Thanksgiving. We're doing a just us thing this year, Mom. Just the nuclear family. Christmas. The kids have the flu. We have to cancel. Easter. Silence. Sarah became a master of the gentle rejection. Every exclusion was wrapped in the language of kindness. We just don't want you to feel obligated to make that long drive, Mom. You should rest. My peace and quiet. As if the crushing loneliness was a spa day I had chosen. As if waking up to the sound of my own breathing in a silent apartment was my definition of happiness. The years blurred into a predictable, painful rhythm. Monday, prep the jars. Tuesday, buy the fruit. Wednesday, the first boil. Thursday, the second boil and canning. Friday, labeling. Saturday, packing the truck. Sunday, the market, the smiles, the conversations with Clara, the brief, hollow comfort of commerce. But the ache was constant. The ache was a physical presence in my home. I saw mothers with daughters in the grocery store and had to turn away. I passed the toy aisle and felt a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest. What did my grandchildren like? Did they like trains? Did they like dolls? I knew their names, Michael and Sophie, only from the one-sided Christmas letters Mark's mother would post on Facebook. Letters I read by logging into a fake account I had created, a digital spy on my own blood. Mom, Sarah's voice snapped me back to the present, to the opulent room on the coast. We know we made mistakes. Mistakes? The word left my mouth like a shard of ice. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. A mistake is taking a wrong turn. Erasing your mother from your life for 15 years, Sarah. Denying your children their grandmother. That is not a mistake. That is a series of deliberate, calculated, cruel decisions. Mark shifted on the sofa. He finally understood. This was not a prodigal son narrative. This was a judgment. His eyes, however, continued to scan, to calculate. He was assessing the value of the woman he had thrown away. You chose, I continued, the words coming from a place of cold clarity that had taken 15 years to form. You chose to cut me out like an old, unfashionable piece of furniture that no longer matched your new decor. Sarah began to sob openly now, ugly, racking sobs, but they still had no power. I had imagined this moment for a decade. I had imagined running to her, holding her, telling her it was all okay. The reality was so much colder. Please, she choked, let us explain. Explain what? My voice rose, and for the first time, I let the anger show. Are you going to explain the 9 birthdays of my grandson Michael, the 7 of my granddaughter Sophie? Are you going to explain the Christmas mornings I spent alone? The nights I was sick with pneumonia and had no one to even bring me a glass of water? Are you going to explain why I, your mother, was not good enough to be in your perfect life? Mark finally spoke, adopting that condescending, placating tone he had perfected. Eliza, we understand you're hurt, but families are complex. We just needed space. It was nothing personal. The laugh that ripped from my throat was a terrible sound, dry and sharp. Nothing personal? You turned my daughter into a stranger. You fed her poison until she believed her own mother was the enemy. You decided I had no place in your world. That sounds intensely personal to me, Mark. I remembered the last day I saw her, 15 years ago. A rainy Tuesday. She came to my old apartment, the one that always smelled of berries and vanilla. She wouldn't sit. She wouldn't accept the tea I had brewed. Mom, Mark and I have been talking, she said, her eyes fixed on a spot on the wall behind me. We think it's better if we have some space. Less contact. Less contact. I felt the floor drop out from under me. What does that mean, sweetheart? It means you're a lot, Mom. You're always present. Mark needs us to be our own unit. A nuclear family. He says your energy is disruptive. Disruptive energy. That's what I was. Not a mother, not a grandmother. A disruptive energy. I, who had rocked her to sleep, who had financed her college education, who had held her hair back when she was sick. Sarah, I don't understand, I pleaded, my voice breaking. What did I do? See? That's the problem. she said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were as cold as her husband's. You always make it about you. This is what's best for my family. Gregory needs to know that I put him and the children first, before anyone. Anyone. That's what I had become. But Sarah, I'm your mother. And he's my husband, she'd replied, her voice flat, rehearsed. It's better this way. For everyone. You can have your own life now, without worrying about us. That was the last time I saw her. Until today. The first few years after that were a gray fog. I lost weight. I lost sleep. I lost hope. It was Clara who pulled me from the wreckage. She showed up at my door one day when I hadn't answered the phone in a week. She took one look at the disarray, at me in my bathrobe, and marched to the kitchen. You have two choices, Eliza, she said, her voice like gravel as she started washing dishes. You can lie here and die of a broken heart for a daughter who doesn't deserve the salt from your tears. Or you can get up, boil some sugar, and build a life that is worthy of you. So I did. Slowly, painfully. Every jar of jam I sold was a brick in my new foundation. Every dollar I saved was a tiny piece of independence. The market became my family. The other women, the ones who knew the unique pain of being erased by their own children, we became a tribe. We shared stories. We shared strength. Now, sitting in my oceanfront home, I saw the two people who had tried to destroy me, and I felt nothing, just a vast, cold pity. So, I said, my voice calm again, after 15 years of silence, what, exactly, brings you to my door today? Mark and Sarah exchanged a look. The look, the one that says, you go. No, you go. Finally, Mark cleared his throat. Eliza, the truth is, we're in a very difficult spot. A difficult spot, I repeated, tasting the irony. What an extraordinary coincidence that this difficult spot coincides with your sudden memory of my existence. Mark flinched. He was preparing his rehearsed speech. My tech startup, the market, it all went under 6 months ago, he confessed, the words torn from him. We lost everything, the savings, the house is in foreclosure. Sarah had to stop working to watch the kids. We couldn't afford childcare. We've been living in my parents' basement. Sarah nodded, the tears flowing freely now. Mom, the kids, they don't understand. They ask why Daddy is so angry all the time. They ask why we can't buy groceries. Ah, I said, leaning back into the soft leather of my armchair. So now I am useful. Now I exist. How? Convenient. The truth about my own transformation was something they couldn't possibly imagine. 4 months ago, I had received a call from a lawyer in Seattle. My Aunt Beatrice, my mother's estranged sister whom I hadn't seen since I was a child, had passed away at 94. She had never married, never had children. She had been a shrewd investor and had, apparently, spent her lonely golden years tracking her few remaining relatives on the internet. She had left me everything. The portfolio, the stocks, the Seattle condo. It totaled nearly $8 million. But it wasn't the money that changed me. It was the letter she left. A handwritten note on thin blue paper. Dearest Eliza, it read, I have watched you from afar. I saw what your daughter did. I saw you stand in the sun and sell your jams while they ignored you. I saw your dignity. I know the pain of being discarded by family. Do not let them do to you what they did to me. This money is not a gift. It is a shield. Use it to build a fortress. Live your life as the queen they refuse to see. With that money, I bought this house, this fortress. I bought my peace. Mom, Sarah tried again, leaning forward, her hands clasped in a desperate prayer. I know we don't deserve it. I know we were awful, but we're family. We're blood. Blood, I scoffed. Blood means nothing without respect, Sarah. Blood means nothing without loyalty. You turned our family into a one-way street. And now you've hit a dead end. You've come back, expecting the road to still be open. Annabelle, Mark cut in, his voice taking on a new, desperate edge. The children, Michael and Sophie, they are innocent in all this. They don't deserve to suffer for our mistakes. There it was. the ace up his sleeve, the grandchildren, the emotional blackmail. He knew, or thought he knew, that this was my weakest point. "The children?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "The same children who grew up not knowing my name? The same children you used as an excuse to keep me away? You do not get to use them as shields now, Mark. You do not get to wield them as weapons to get at my money." Sarah's sobs became hysterical. "Mom, I didn't know how to stand up to him. He said it was for the best. He said you were a bad influence." "He said," I interrupted, looking directly at the man who had stolen my daughter. "He thought. He decided. And where were you, Sarah? Where was your voice? Where was your heart?" "It got lost," she whispered, an admission of such profound weakness it almost made me pity her. "It got lost between his promises and my fear. And now you're here," I said, standing up. I walked to the window, turning my back on them, looking out at the vast, uncaring, beautiful ocean. "You're here not because you found your heart. You're here because you're broke." I knew how they'd found out. The town was small. The gossip mill, powered by Mr. Henderson at the bakery, was efficient. The jam lady, who suddenly bought the old Miller mansion on the cliff, the one who paid cash, the story had spread like wildfire. They didn't come looking for Mom. They came looking for the rich lady on the cliff. "We heard you'd come into some good fortune," Mark muttered, admitting it. "We're happy for you, Eliza. We truly are. But you're here for a handout," I finished. "Let's not dress it up in pretty words like family and mistakes. This is a transaction. So, what is the price?" Mark and Sarah looked at each other. Mark, the pragmatist, nodded. The act was over. "We need $250,000, he said, the number blunt and ugly in the clean, quiet room, "to stop the foreclosure, to get a new apartment, to start over." I turned from the window. I looked at them, these two small, greedy, broken people. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. It was so simple, so powerful. "What?" Sarah gasped. "No," I repeated, stronger this time. "I will not give you $250,000. I will not give you a single dime." "Mom, please." Sarah scrambled off the sofa, crawling on her knees to where I stood. She grabbed at my legs, just as she had done as a child. But this time, it felt like a violation. "You don't understand. We will be on the street. The children." I looked down at her, my face impassive. I too was on the street, Sarah. Emotionally, financially, for 15 years. I was in a place of such profound despair, I sometimes wondered if it was worth waking up. And where were you? You were busy protecting your nuclear family from my disruptive energy. You made your choice. And these are the consequences. Mark shot to his feet, his face purple with rage. The mask of the charming, repentant son-in-law was gone. In his place was the tyrant I always knew was lurking underneath. "You old bitch," he snarled. "After everything, we're here, begging. We're family. You have more than you could ever need. How can you be so selfish?" "Selfish," I mused, stepping away from Sarah's grasp. That is a word that insecure men use to control women. I was selfless for 60 years. I gave everything. I gave my love, my time, my energy, my money, all to you, Sarah. And in return, you threw me on the trash heap. I walked to my desk and pulled out a small, framed photo. It was of me and Clara at the market, laughing, holding up our jars. "This is my family now, Sarah. Clara, Mr. Henderson. The women from my support group. The people who saw me. The real me, when I had nothing. They are my family, not because of blood, but because of loyalty, because of presence." "Mom," Sarah was weeping. A broken thing on my floor. "I'll leave him. I swear. If you help us, I'll leave him. We can. We can be a family again." It was the most pathetic plea of all, an offer to trade her husband for my bank account. "No, Sarah," I said, and this time my voice was soft, filled with a deep, ancient sadness. "It's too late. You don't get to choose him when he's successful, and then choose me when he's a failure. That's not how love works. That's how a parasite works. Mark lunged for the door. Fine, rot in your castle, Eliza. We'll tell everyone. We'll tell the whole town what a cold, heartless monster you really are, abandoning your own daughter and grandchildren. His threat was the last, desperate act of a defeated man. It almost made me smile. Go ahead, Mark, I said, opening the front door for them, the salty wind rushing in. You do that, but the town already knows my story. They watched me for 15 years. They saw me build my life from nothing while my loving family was gone. They saw my dignity. They know exactly who I am. Now, thanks to you, they're about to find out who you are. His face went pale. He hadn't thought of that. He grabbed Sarah's arm, yanking her to her feet. Let's go, Sarah. This is pointless. Sarah looked at me one last time. Her eyes were hollow, empty. The last flicker of hope had been extinguished. She had come here expecting the soft, forgiving mother she had abandoned. She had found me instead. The queen, the fortress. Mom, she whispered, one last time. Goodbye, Sarah, I said. I watched them walk to their car, a dented, rusting sedan that was as broken as they were. They didn't speak. Mark got in and slammed the door. Sarah followed, her movements slow, her back bowed in defeat. I closed my own door. The solid, heavy wood clicked shut. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The house was silent again. The air was clean. Just salt and freedom. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of the expensive wine Aunt Beatrice's letter had recommended. I took it out to the deck, overlooking the ocean. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in violent, beautiful shades of orange and purple. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was Clara. I smiled and answered. How did it go? She asked. No preamble. Exactly as you said it would, I replied, taking a sip of wine. The liquid was crisp and cold. They came for money. They left with nothing. And how do you feel? I watched a seagull dive into the surf, emerging victorious. I took a deep breath of the cold, clean air. I feel, I said, completely and absolutely at peace. True family is not an obligation based on blood. It is a privilege based on respect. It is not something you can discard when it is inconvenient and reclaim when you are desperate. Love, real love, is not a resource to be exploited. It is a shelter to be earned. And I had finally, after a lifetime of pain, learned to build my own.